We're back. Thanks for staying put. Ron Prosor is a longtime diplomat who has faithfully served Israeli governments across the political spectrum. His foreign policy credentials are clear to all, but some may be surprised at his still serious yet lighter side. Let's take a look.
It is an opportunity to get back to three main activities, what some might even call the three pillars of diplomacy: alcohol, protocol, and cholesterol. I can call on all nations to imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will live as one. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
As Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, I usually get a chilly reception at the United Nations, so let me put some ice here.
Hollywood celebrated the Oscars, and as millions tuned in, I thought of the following. If the Oscars for maintenance of international peace and security were given at the UN, I would not be surprised if these candidates were awarded prizes. In the Best Actor category, for acting like a peace-loving country, while developing nuclear capabilities, denying the Holocaust, and threatening the destruction of another member state, the Oscar goes to Iran. In the category for Best Supporting Actor, for its unrelenting support to the Assad regime in killing hundreds of thousands of civilians, the Oscar goes to Hezbollah. In the category for Best Visual Effects, for making women disappear from public squares, the Oscar goes to, surprise, surprise, Saudi Arabia. No competition there. And finally, for rewriting history, the Oscar for Best Editing goes to the Palestinian Authority. But the truth is that the Palestinian Authority already received enough prizes from this institution. As musical superstar Shakira said in a song, "This time for Africa," she says, "Today's your day, I feel it. You paved the way, believe it. This time for Africa." Thank you, Madam President.
This time for Africa.
Earlier this week, Ambassador Prosor joined us from the APAC Policy Conference in Washington. Hello, Ambassador.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we understand that there is no longer any daylight between the U.S. and Israel under the new Trump administration. Would you recommend that President Trump make good on his campaign pledge to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, despite the expected reaction in the region?
Well, first and foremost, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the Jewish people, is the right thing to do on all dimensions. And I think that it's important to do that because it sets the tone. And in addition to that, I think that it's important for us to look at this relationship and be very happy on the resumption of the intimacy between Israel and the United States of America. This is an amazing friendship on both sides of the aisle. And it's important because we're going to have disagreements in the future to be able to talk about them quietly, as allies, as friends inside the family.
And what about prospects for the Arab Peace Initiative? Isn't this conditioned on a two-state peace deal on Palestine?
So that's, moving a bit forward, 2 steps ahead. I think the important thing is to look at the region and see something which is strategic. Suddenly there are coinciding interests between Israel, the Saudis, the Egyptians, the Jordanians, because they are more threatened today by terrorism, by extreme Islamism, and the coinciding interests are there because they are really under pressure from Iran. So we could use those coinciding interests to try and do something and build something together. So when the risks are high on other issues, there are also opportunities.
From your past decades of public service and from your time as ambassador to the UN and in the Court of St. James, are you finding it increasingly difficult to sell the notion of Israel as a peace-seeking nation?
Well, I'll give you an example which is factual. You know, with Egypt, after so many years, when there was someone on the other side that really wanted to achieve peace, the people of Israel always, reach out to anyone. And we made peace with Egypt. I'll remind you, we made peace with Jordan. And the state of Israel, left and right, seeks for peace. But we have to have the right partner, and we also have to really look at the region and look and say Israel, under all those pressures, has to make sure that when we reach a comprehensive peace, it's a peace for generations.
So who would you say conveys a stronger message?
Well, look, as the former Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, I'm happy to say the following, that as long as we stand up and really against those that try and boycott, divest, and sanctions against Israel, and call it, and look at the structural and institutional bias against Israel, which I'm very, very happy to see that the new American administration under Nikki Haley's command is addressing it. It's absolutely absurd to have a special article only singling out Israel, Article 7 in the Council of Human Rights. By the way, the Council of Human Rights always reminds me of, it's like having Charles Manson run the crime investigation squad of the NYPD. It's countries like Syria and Libya heading this organization. I mean, this is absurd. So it's high time to really stand up and call it and stop this institutional and structural bias against Israel, which at the end of the day only delegitimizes the bodies that delegitimize Israel, the only democracy in the region.
Have you witnessed any greater willingness by the Sunni Gulf states to cooperate openly with Israel due to the common threat from Iran?
Yes. Because what you see is they feel that the rope is tightening around their necks because of the Iranian issue. And it's survivability issues for them. And they see Israel suddenly as a partner in fighting against terrorism, against Islamic radicalism. And in the sense, I see an amazing opportunity that should be pursued because we are trying to reach changes. And I think this can change the equation in the region.
And after all those years you've spent trying to dissuade P5+1 nations from entering into a nuclear deal with Iran, what do you think now? Diplomacy at its best, or it's still a very bad and dangerous deal?
Well, look, Iran, it's really, it makes me smile because I myself, with Major General Amos Gilad, knocked on the doors of the White House in 1998 and talked about the Iran nuclear weapons program. Everyone looked at us and said, hey, they look like intelligent people. They're seeing, a forest where there are no trees. And look at Iran, the #1 sponsor of terrorism. Day in and day out trying to undermine the region. The Saudis, Yemen, Iraq, in Syria. Look at what they're doing out in the world. This is absolutely a regime, an Ayatollah regime, with missiles, and the topping on the ice is nuclear weapons. This has to be stopped, and people who don't understand that are making a grave mistake. The Iranians are very, very clear. They want to achieve a nuclear weapon, and the world has to stand up and make sure they don't get this, because the world is going to become a much, much more dangerous place if the Iranians achieve their ambitions.
And we'll have more with Ambassador Prosor after this short break.